with him right there, singing with him, but trying to help in case the commercials came up and it got crazy. Sean must be with me, so sorry about that, guys. I love singing with them. So let's pray, and we'll get started. Lord, this is what we want. That last song, we want you to walk with us, and so Lord, just ask you to do that. You would come here in the cool of the day, in the morning, in the garden, and you would walk with us. And so, Lord, just be with us. Help me to articulate these things you gave to me last night to share with your people. These are your people, Lord. So let them hear your voice. Let them be built up, encouraged, rebuked where needed, giving them everything they need for their walk this week with you. So be with us today. Bless our time together by your Spirit. May you be glorified. Pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So last Sunday, we looked at chapter 45 and 46 in Genesis. And I asked you two questions at the beginning. You remember that. Some of you weren't here. But here's the two questions. What's the most important thing in your life? And then, who is the most important person in your life? And as I was saying, we had our outline. We're filling in the spaces. And it's so easy to fill in the right answer here in church. But I said, think about if I asked you that at work. What's the most important thing in your life, right? And then I asked you, maybe at a get-together, who's the most important person in your life? And it should be the same answers here in church as out there. But oftentimes it's not, right? We get thrown off. I said, maybe you don't remember that I'm your pastor and I asked you this question kind of out of the blue and you're amongst, the heathen or the unbelievers. What would your answer be? So the answer to the first question was, my relationship, right? What's the most important thing in my life? And it should be my relationship to the Lord. My relationship with God by Jesus, right? Through Jesus. And then the second one follows right into that. Who's the most important person in my life? And it should be Jesus, right? And it has to be in that order. Jesus has to be first. And if he's not, then our relationships, our workplace, our family life, everything's going to be messed up. So we looked at that. And we saw how when that's not the case, then we begin to do what's right in our own eyes, and we begin to struggle. And we begin to be influenced by the things of this world, the pressures of work and this life and everything. It reminds me of the story of just lost his name. I'm doing this off the cuff. Chariots of Fire. Eric Liddell, right? He decides to honor the Lord and not run on Sunday. And it's his race. This is the one he's trained for his whole life, right? This is what he was good at. But it was being held on Sunday. He says, I can't. I'm going to honor the Lord. I can't do it on Sunday. And so Monday, the next day, he's running a race that he didn't train for. And one of the U.S. athletes comes and hands him this little scripture. He's up there getting ready to run. You remember what it is. Those who honor me, I will honor. And if we will do that with our life, if we will honor the Lord with our life, won't he take care of the things that we're worried about? Won't he? And he will. And he's just looking for people to trust and honor him with their life, and then he will honor them. He will. In the construction field, there's always a pressure and time and seasons of, man, you got to work, and it's so easy, especially right now as I'm doing both pastoring and bivocational, working in construction. It's so easy to work 7 days a week, right? And not give a day to the Lord and not trust him. Because I have all these pressures, I have these deadlines, I have these things I got to do. The storm's coming, I got to get the roof on. And I can always do that. But who's the one that keeps the rain from falling that day? You know? Who's the one that shelters and prolongs the day, doesn't let the sun go down so we can win the battle, right? The Lord does. He honors us. And He honored Eric Little that day. And he won the gold medal in a race he didn't train for, because he was willing to make a stand in front of everybody and honor the Lord. And God blessed him in that. And so we were looking at those things. And here's Jacob. We're looking at his life. We're going to do a little bit of a nutshell. Now, for 22 years, in the mind of Jacob, okay, his son, Joseph, was dead. 22 years, Joseph is dead, right? And anybody who's ever lost anybody, does a day go by that you don't think of that person? It doesn't. It doesn't. Now, upon hearing that he was alive, all he could think about was going to Egypt. And I got to go see Joseph. That's all he could think about. But Jacob has a new nature. Right? He's supposed to. He has a new nature. And though he will struggle with his old nature, fear and doubt and self-reliance and a lack of trust, the new nature, Israel, governed by God, stops at Beersheba to inquire of the Lord. Should I go? Imagine that. Would you do that? If all of a sudden that one you've been thinking about for the last 22 years was alive, they weren't dead. I mean, would you stop and inquire, Lord, should I go see that? That'd be hard to do, wouldn't it? I mean, you'd be running. But the new nature in Jacob, Israel, takes captive, right? Because he's going to Egypt. And every time Grandpa went to Egypt, right, he got in trouble, right? And then his father, Isaac, was trying to go, and God said, don't go to Egypt. Right? But there was that promise. Hey, you're going to Egypt. You're going to be there 400 years. I'm going to multiply you. And then I'm going to bring you out and give you this land. So each generation was like, should we go to Egypt? You know? And so Jacob, before he goes, he's all packed up. He's got the whole clan, 70 people. Actually, it's 66, including himself, 67. And then Joseph and Ephraim and Manasseh are in Egypt. So there's the 70. And the tribe of Israel that God's going to multiply. Okay? So he's got everything all packed up, and he stops at Beersheba. Now, to make sacrifices and inquire of the Lord. And that's what we were looking at last Sunday. We're going to look at it still a little bit today as we move on. Now, and again, would you do that? Would you stop? Right? Now, most Christians, for much of their lives, come to church on Sunday. Sometimes. If it doesn't affect their other plans, let alone ask God what they should do. Let alone ask God what they should do. Now, Israel did, because he was afraid to go. And God said, after the sacrifices, God said, don't be afraid to go down to Egypt. I'm going with you. I'm going with you. And when God goes with us, right? Noah, come into the ark, right? If God's in the ark and he says, come into the ark, it's not going down, right? Your ship's going to float, whether you're a shipbuilder or not. It's going to float. Now, even though Jacob packed up everything and took all his family, he stopped to inquire of the Lord if he should go. And I believe he would have turned back. I believe he would have turned back if the Lord said, no, don't go down to Egypt. And that would have been the really hard thing to do, right? Probably would have sent the boys, why don't you go buy a little bit more food and just come and see me, right? 3 places Jacob lived. They're on your outline on the left. 3 places, 4 phases of his life. 3 plus 4 equals 7. Right? Number of completion. Okay? And as we see at the end of Jacob's life, he's being completed. First, we begin in the land of Canaan. This is where Jacob was born, in the land of Canaan, the first place. Now I have 4 spaces, but one place is going to be used twice. So it's really 3 places, 4 phases. Okay? So number 1, Canaan. This is where Jacob was born. And he was clueless. This is first phase, clueless. How we are so clueless before we come to Christ, right? We think we know everything, but we're clueless. All the answers to life, why we're here, where we're going, what we're supposed to do, how we get there, all of those things are answered when we come to Christ, when we get saved. Before that, we're clueless. And Jacob was clueless for 77 years of his life until he fled from his brother Esau. And he laid his head down on a rock in a place called Luz, which is separation, I think, or separated, I forget. And he laid down there and he saw a vision of the Lord. And he's like, man, I didn't know he was in this place. He was clueless. So he calls the place Bethel, right? The house of God. Okay? And so he enters into a relationship with the Lord. The Lord makes a covenant with him there. And then he goes on up to Hebron. So the second place, not Hebron, excuse me, Haran. Paddan Aram. Haran. So that's the second place. And although Jacob knew God, God had made a covenant with him. But there in Haran, Jacob lived in the flesh. That's the second phase of his life, the flesh. Now some say we live in the flesh before we come to the Lord, and that's true. But there's a lot of Christians out there living in the flesh, right? In carnality. A self-made man. Jacob, self-made man there in Paddan Aram, right? Self-reliant, 22 years in that place. 77 years clueless, okay? Now he's in the flesh, 22 years in Paddan Aram. Now as before, when Jacob was fleeing Canaan from Esau, now he's fleeing Haran from Laban. Not much has changed, right? But before he can cross back over into the land of promise and experience what God has for him, he has to experience a breaking. There's a breaking point. There's always a breaking point when the flesh is in control of our life. There's that breaking point. And then at that point, God gives him a new name, a new nature, a new way of thinking. And he changes his name from Jacob to Israel. But it's not over, as you guys know. There's now the new battle between the flesh and the spirit. Right? Flesh and the spirit. Who's going to win? Who's going to control my life? And as we see with Jacob, now for the next 32 years, the flesh really won over in Jacob. And so even though he's back in the land of Canaan, which is the third... is that where we're at? Mm-hmm. Canaan, Haran. Now we're in Canaan again. He's there in his own strength. And isn't that our case sometimes? We're going through this Christian life in our own strength. We're self-reliant, not trusting in God. It's so easy as a contractor. I'm at work and problem comes up and I just solve the problem. I'm a problem solver, right? I got to make this happen. And I can go through my life so much that way. I can solve this. I can make this happen. I'm in a hurry. I got to get this done. There's a deadline. And I don't slow down. I don't pray. And I don't seek the Lord. What should I do? What should I do in this situation? So easy to get caught up in that. And make my own way in my own strength. 32 years Jacob lived basically that way. Defeated mostly because he relied on his own strength. The prophet Zechariah, first on your outline, spoke these words of God that we need to live by as Christians. Zechariah 4:6. Then he said to me, this is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel. Right? Put your name in there. This is the word of the Lord to him. Not by might, nor by spirit. Nor by power. Not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of hosts. Not by my might or my own strength, but by my spirit, declares the Lord. Anything I'm going to accomplish, anything that's going to really get done the way it's supposed to get done is going to be by His Spirit. It's not by me making it happen. And that's what I do a lot of times. I make it happen. And people suffer. Now here, finally, at the end of his life, okay, Jacob's now what? 130 years old right now. 130 years old. And now finally, he goes to Egypt to what? Now he's going to live by faith. So Egypt is the final place. And the last phase of his life is finally, he's going to live by faith. So he stops to inquire of the Lord to get confirmation. And here's an example of a hard life, from clueless to the flesh to our own strength. And when we come to the end of all that struggle, walking by faith. And so I ask you the question there, how are you walking? And be honest, fill that in. How are you walking? Now, in a little bit of a review, in order to hear from the Lord, he offered sacrifices and worship to the Lord. We looked at those last Sunday. 3 basic sacrifices. The sin offering. Number 1, sin offering. Which always has to be first, right? When you come to the Lord as an unbeliever, come to the Lord, there has to be the sin offering. Jesus did that, right? And we have to deal with our sin. If we're going to hear from the Lord, we got to deal with our sin. Right? Otherwise, my ears are numb. I can't hear. So the sin offering cleaned the slate so Jacob could hear God's voice. Sin numbs the heart and puts to sleep our ears from hearing. I can't hear the Lord. I hear everything else. I hear every other voice out there saying, hey, do this, you should do that. Oh man, we got this deadline, we got to do this. And the Lord is drowned out because of sin. In the book of Leviticus, the Lord warned that exile and persecution and progressively worse punishments would befall the people if they would break faith. This is the last phase in Jacob's life, faith. And God is going to warn later on the children of Israel through Moses in the book of Levi not to break faith with him. Leviticus 26:14 says, but if you will not listen to me and will not do all these commandments. Jacob wanted to hear from the Lord. He wanted to listen to the Lord. The sin offering. Now notice the rebuke portion of this warning begins with the phrase, if you will not listen to me. Which is our duty to love the Lord with all of our heart. Love the Lord with all of your heart. Jacob stopped and sacrificed so he could hear from the Lord. Again, this is why I asked the question last Sunday. Who and what is most important in your life? If you walk contrary to me, which occurs several times during the rebuke in Leviticus 26. If you walk contrary with me. Now it means if you walk carelessly with me. How many times do we walk carelessly with the Lord? Then I will allow things to karach means to befall or to happen. and therefore suggests a sense of randomness. In other words, if the people regarded the events of life as random, then God would make random trouble arise in their midst, walking carelessly. Contrary to the Lord. For this reason, a careless attitude about the things of God is the first step toward apostasy. A careless attitude about the things of God. How many Christians today have a careless attitude about the things of God? Everything else is more important than the Lord being the most important thing and making time for Him. Joseph was able to look back and see God's hand in everything. Joseph wasn't walking carelessly with the Lord. He could see God's hand in everything, even in the toughest situations. And he did his best in those situations to honor the Lord. Now the second offering is the burnt offering. The burnt offering. Speaking of consecration, separating ourselves from things that cause separation from God. We deal with the sin, and now we need to look at what's causing me to sin. And I need to separate from those things. Right? Consecrate myself. As the tribe of Israel would go to Egypt, they would be separated from the Egyptians. Remember we talked about that. The Egyptians basically hated shepherds. And so God used that to separate His people. Right? Look out there. The world hates Christians. Right? We're separated. And it's a good thing, isn't it? But it doesn't work. It is. It keeps us pure. Sometimes you got to take the cookies from the upper shelf and put them down so that they can eat them. Right? Even the little ones can sit here and learn with us. So it's a good thing that the Jews were separated in Egypt. Otherwise, they would have intermarried and they would have been absorbed into the Egyptian culture. And God's people would have been lost. Right? Doesn't that happen to us? If we don't wear the banner, hey, I'm a Christian, right? I want to live for Christ, and make a stand and identify ourselves, then we're basically kind of spy Christians, right? We're covert Christians. And people don't really know we're Christians. And so we allow ourselves to be kind of influenced and put in situations where temptation, right? But if you fly the banner, you know, a lot of times it's going to save you from a lot of temptation. People aren't going to invite you to the party or to the thing. Or you know what I mean? Those different situations. John Corson, in a commentary on this topic, he said this. I'll just read it to you. I have discovered that a Bible in my hand, a bumper sticker on my car, or a Christian logo on my shirt makes me a marked man. Here's a secret. Closet Christians get in all kinds of trouble and are susceptible to walk into temptation needlessly. Identify yourself at every opportunity, even if it makes you look like a shepherd. The Egyptians hated the shepherds. Right? They looked down on them. They didn't want to intermingle with them. Even if it makes you look like a shepherd in the eyes of the Egyptians. Don't say, I'm going to a meeting. Say, I'm going to a Bible study. Why don't you come with me? It will help identify who you are and keep you from getting absorbed into society, into the culture. The third sacrifice or offering was the peace offering. Number 3, the peace offering. Now this is where you would burn the fat of the animal and sit down and eat the rest. You had God's portion and you had your portion. This is the communion offering. Okay? You dealt with the sin. You consecrated yourself with the burnt offering. And now you have the peace offering. This is where you're going to commune with the Lord. This is where you're going to sit down and dine with Him. And He's going to fellowship with you. Now He's going to talk to Jacob. And He's going to say, hey, don't be afraid. I'm going with you. I'm going to make you a great nation now. When we get back to the place of communing with the Lord after dealing with the sin and consecrating ourselves, I believe it will be like that time in the New Testament where Jesus is feeding the 5,000 and Jesus says to His disciples in John 6:12, and when they had eaten their fill, He told His disciples, gather up the leftover fragments that nothing may be lost. This is what Jacob experienced. Gather up the leftover fragments, Jacob, that nothing may be lost. Jacob's got 17 years left of his life. And this last 17 years, this is where Israel fully reigns over Jacob. Faith. How many years will that take up, right? That's the question. How many years will that take up? Jacob had wasted a lot of time, a lot of years wandering around, caused his family a lot of pain by not coming back to Bethel permanently, to the house of God. But more importantly, when he did come back to Bethel, for a moment he came back to El Bethel, the God of the house of God. Not the building, not the house of God, but the God of the house of God. And therein lies the question again, who's the most important person in your life? Now, in looking later, as the children of Israel were coming out of Egypt under Moses, 2 weeks to march directly to the promised land. But the people weren't ready, right? And needed to wander from one dry place to the next dry place. Therefore, we are told to remember the whole way of the journey. Deuteronomy 8:2. And you shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, that He might humble you, testing you to know what is in your heart, whether you would keep His commandments or not. Yes, God works all things together for good, even tragic events, and therefore we are commanded to remember the whole way of our journey. Gather up the leftover fragments that nothing may be lost. So we press on to the goal, but also trust that God is able to redeem even the seasons of our lives. Like Jacob, wasted. Things missed, opportunities. Maybe illness has come and you did nothing like Job. In those places, God can redeem the waste places because of Jesus our Redeemer. He can redeem it. Nothing of our lives will be entirely lost. He redeems our desolate places. Look at Joel chapter 2, verse 25. I will restore to you the years the swarming locust has eaten, the hopper, the destroyer, and the cutter, my great army which I sent among you. Sometimes God sends the famine, right, to do it and accomplish what He wills. And like Job, he did nothing wrong to deserve what was happening to him. It was a test. And at the end of his trial, he was blessed. Twice as much. Right? God restored what the locust had eaten. And that's going to happen in your life. In returning and rest shall be your salvation. God can and does restore the fruit, the blessings, the wasted time that the locust has eaten. He does. He will. Jacob had lost all hope over seeing Joseph again. It seemed that the promises of God had failed. You ever feel like that? The promises of God have failed. But God's love never fails. It never gives up. It never runs out on you. And there's a song you can sing. It never gives up. It never runs out. It never fails. In Psalm chapter 39, as though Jacob was praying this, here's David's cry out to the Lord. Psalm 39:12. Hear my prayer, O Lord, and give ear to my cry. Hold not your peace at my tears, for I am a sojourner with you, a guest like all my fathers. And then his prayer is answered. Psalm 40, verse 1. I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined to me and He heard my cry. You see that? God hears our cry. God cares what's going on. He cares what you're going through. He sees it. He sees you lying there, empty, hurting, suffering. And He says, I'm going to restore. I'm going to renew. I'm going to build up. Verse 2. He drew me up from the pit of destruction, out of the miry clay, and set my feet upon the rock, making my steps secure. Have you ever been there? Has God rescued you before? He did us. He did us. And that's what Holly shared last Wednesday. And it was an awesome testimony that Holly gave. He brought us out of a pit of destruction. And then, verse 3, He put a new song in my mouth. He put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise to our God. Many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord. When God does wonderful things in our lives, He does it so we will sing a new song, so we will share with others and bring others into the kingdom for His glory. Psalm 40, verse 4. Blessed is the man who makes the Lord his trust, who does not turn to the proud, to those who go astray after a life. And so Jacob, even though he faltered, God never let go and carried out His plan for him and his house. And so they moved to Egypt. And God won't falter with you either. He will carry out His plan for your life. And so the question, will we let Him? Will we let Him? Will we stop fighting? Will we stop in our own strength trying to work things out? Will we seek Him? Deal with the sin, consecrate ourselves, commune with Him, seek His direction. Will we walk by faith and trust Him? So Genesis 46:28, to finish up chapter 46. And then Jacob sent Judah before him to Joseph, to point out before him the way to Goshen. And they came to the land of Goshen. So Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to Goshen to meet his father Israel. Not Jacob, Israel. And he presented himself to him and fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. And Israel said to Joseph, "Now let me die, since I have seen your face, as you are still alive." Israel, now sees the promises of God fulfilled. And he says, "I'm ready." What a special day it will be when we as believers can look through the eyes of faith. Look through the eyes of faith and see the promises of God fulfilled in our lives before they ever come to pass. That's the walking by faith. Looking through the eyes of faith and see the promises of God for our lives fulfilled before they ever come to pass. How pleasing that will be to God, and how restful it will be for us. He would beckon the children of Israel to enter into His rest, but they wouldn't. And a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of problems. We need to enter into God's rest. Are you resting in Him? Are we resting in Him? Or are we striving? And as we strive, God allows problems to happen. Until we get to the breaking point, and then we go, I'm going to trust God. I'm going to trust God. I'm going to walk by faith. Amen? Let's pray. Lord, we need you to enable us by your Spirit to empower us to do that. Because in our flesh we're so weak and we're so used to relying on ourselves and getting things done. So would you help us, Lord, to do that, to trust, to walk by faith, not by sight. To put the glasses of faith on and see your promises fulfilled in our life and trust in them. And pray and seek you and deal with the sin, consecrate ourselves and commune with you. Let that be the most important thing in our lives as we not just sit in church another Sunday and check a box, but as we put a stake down, and this is the day the Lord has made. I'm going to rejoice and be glad in it. I'm going to walk with Him. I'm going to walk with Him this week, this time, this day, starting today. Help us to do that, Lord. Fill us afresh with your Spirit. Bless your people. Pray in Jesus' name.